Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this webinar today to learn more about Accelerating Practical Solutions, a new program from Smart Growth America. We're going to be talking about these tailored workshops specifically for state DOTs. My name is Jerry Mincer. I'm the Program Manager for the Governor's Institute on Community Design, and that is a program of Smart Growth America. And I'm going to be joined today by Beth Osborne, our Senior Policy Advisor. A little bit about the Governor's Institute. Like I said, it's a program of Smart Growth America that advises governors and state leaders on policies and growth and development in their states. We bring together practitioners and academicians in the fields of government, design and development, and regional economics to help each state's executive team make informed choices as they shape the future of their states. And like I said, this is a new program, but it builds on some of the work on practical solutions that Smart Growth America has done previously. So I'm going to turn it over to Beth to talk a little bit about the purpose of Accelerating Practical Solutions and the technical assistance that we're offering through this program.
Thanks, Jerry. This is Beth Osborne, as Jerry introduced me. I used to work at USDOT and before that on Capitol Hill, and since I've been here, we've worked a lot with states on finding ways to get better value for their investment. And practical solutions, which some people refer to as practical design, is a concept of instead of building our transportation assets to a particular standard, trying to build based on the articulated need that is known today and address today's needs, not theoretical future needs. A lot of our program is designed around making sure that our assets are not out of date in the middle of their life, but in doing so, we often overbuild and spend more money than we need to, and this causes several problems, which I'm about to get into. So the purpose of this program is looking at ways to accelerate tailored practical solutions for transportation needs and the safety of all users while we're doing it. So moving on to the next slide, the purpose of making sure we are addressing the needs that we know are real and existent today and coming in the near future is mostly because we don't have enough money to do everything we need to do. And so finding ways to build projects that address specific, clear needs, it often means smaller projects that can get done faster, being able to address more problems in more places, streamlining the project delivery process. It often means making communities happier because they're getting projects now, and even if it doesn't address all the problems that could potentially come to face them over the next 20 years, it's the problems that face them right now getting addressed and getting improvement. And it is about building internal capacity to plan and design, construct and operate in a context-sensitive way. So it's not just about avoiding overbuilt solutions, it's making sure those solutions really and truly fit the community in which they're being built. So many times we build to a particular standard based on a tradition. This is an arterial. Arterials must look like this without properly considering the context. And practical solutions is making sure that that context and those needs that are today's needs are addressed immediately. So what we have been funded to do is to provide workshops to analyze where states are in addressing practical solutions, because so many have started addressing this in recent years, recognizing that as opposed to in the 1990s and early 2000s where suddenly reauthorization came with massive new forms of money and a large increase in our formula funds, that's just not happening anymore. And folks are looking for ways to get, like I said, the greatest value for their investment. So we have funding for one-day workshops that are free and can look at what's been done, find where the barriers are, and help states take it the next step based on experiences in other states and communities. And we can imitate what's worked and avoid what hasn't. And then it would also come with a recommendations memo following the workshop. We put together some sample projects or topics because we know that not every state is facing the exact same challenges. Not every state has tried the same things. We have a list of examples here, like linking planning to project development and delivery, balancing the needs of all roadway users in a variety of contexts, integrating meaningful community engagement, integrating land use and transportation, improving scoping procedures. We actually did a lot of work on this in several states recently, where we just went back to basics in properly defining the purpose and needs statement that didn't foreclose particularly lower cost opportunities by the way it was phrased. Clarification of policies and processes related to design guidance, performance measures, and looking at case studies in your community and workshopping a particular project that might be bringing in a whole lot of these topics into that one project. So going on to talk about some of the places we have worked on these issues, we worked with the state of Florida. They came to us very much focused on implementing a complete streets policy because they are facing an unusually high number of roadway fatalities for bicyclists and pedestrians, and they didn't like being at the top of that list. And they had adopted a complete streets policy, but they hadn't seen a real change in the products coming out of their design process, and they wanted to look under the hood and figure out why that was. And so we did a workshop with them that looked at best practices, but then we facilitated a conversation on what made those best practices hard to implement, and got into some real detail, including what was not surprising, things like standards and design manuals and policies that didn't support the complete streets policy. But we also got into some rather surprising areas, like the way the performance of the engineers was measured. And one of the things that came out was that the real focus of Florida DOT was project delivery. And they had problems in the past, so they designed their program around making sure projects came in on time and on budget. And even if it didn't perform as well as they'd like, if it was on time and on budget, the engineer was reviewed well. And if it was not on time and on budget, but it was a fabulous project, there was that was still a problem. And so what ended up happening in practice was the design guides they had a lot of designs in them focused on wide, high-speed roadways. And so if you wanted to build that, you had the design complete and before you, and you could plug it right on in and go. But if you wanted to do something different from that, if you wanted to do something that was more of a traditional Main Street, you had to design it yourself. You had to seek a lot of variances in the land use code and exceptions in the transportation side, and it just delayed things. So the smart engineer who wanted to do well in their job delivered the fast project, not the project with the outcomes that the community wanted. And so in digging under these practices and culture and things like that, we identified changes that could be made in Florida's system that included things like guidances and standards and manuals, but it also included just basic personnel practice, which I think surprised everybody. We've also done some work with Colorado DOT, where we had a visioning workshop and talked about establishing groups and coordination across the agency. I know this is certainly true at the U.S. Department of Transportation, and in the state DOTs I've worked with, everybody expresses the frustration with the typical challenge of working in a large bureaucracy where it's a big system, and you have to break into silos in order to function, but then those silos always are challenged to communicate with one another. The planners put together a really great plan, and they hand scopes off to the designers, and the designers don't have the context of the planners, and the planners aren't included in the design. And what happens when, in those handoffs, and whether or not there's ways to form coordination teams across them. setting expectations about how to do performance-based practical design, looking at their scoping procedure, especially for smaller projects, developing a checklist of information to review and stakeholders to reach out to. This is a big deal. Engineers repeatedly complain that they're being asked to figure out the impact of land use around particular projects, particularly on non-motorized travelers, but they weren't trained on land use. And it's really unfair to say, start thinking about this whole area of expertise that you can have a graduate degree in without giving any guidance. And so a lot of states are developing checklists to help them figure out what are the aspects of that context they're supposed to be looking for in their evaluations. And I won't go through all of these, but just give you a sense of the overall visioning that they were looking to do in Colorado to figure out how you even take steps forward on performance-based practical design before you even have a conversation about how to train folks. So this program is a good fit for a state that maybe is struggling with roadway design issues, particularly making sure their design standards fit with a call or a demand for a complete streets policy. This is good for a state that's just looking to change the way they interact with their local governments on receiving project ideas. It's great for a state that is looking to improve the adaptation and implementation of a new guidance on practical design or complete streets. And it's good for a state that is, looking to make projects go further. One of the programs we didn't mention in this, which I'm now going to mention even though we don't have a slide for it, is our work with the state of Tennessee, who, they had, for a relatively small state, an $8 billion backlog in projects, and they were looking for a way to get through their backlog. And we helped them develop a new scoping and evaluation procedure that pulled up old projects. And instead of, in many cases, they had designed projects to build to standard, but not address the purpose of the project as well as they needed to. So they went back and defined the purpose and rescoped the project and came up with projects that were 1/20th the cost. And we're able to interact with those locals and say, the project we had initially scoped is still 20 years off if we have to come up with $60 million, but we have this idea that can address your problem for $500,000, and we can do that in the next couple of years. So this is a really good program to discuss strategies that allow states to do that and deal with funding shortages and just the credibility of utilizing every dollar they have the best they possibly can. So I do want to point folks to our webpage at www.govinstitute.org/apply. It's a very simple application. It is designed to be short. We do not need folks to go on and on about what's going on, but just some basic information about what steps that your department has already taken in these areas, and what are the barriers you're finding, and how could this technical assistance address those barriers. That will be due on August the 1st, which it sounds like a long way off, but it's really not. It's coming up. I think the important thing for you all to know is, A, if you have any questions, that you can reach out to Jerry, whose email is here, and also that this would include some basic commitments of staff time for the workshop, and staff contacts to collaborate with to develop an agenda that is relevant to your organization. This is not a pre-planned agenda. We have ideas for agendas based on other states we've worked with, and we can certainly come in with ideas, but the goal is to design something specifically for the challenges your state faces and address those head on. And the last thing I will mention is it does require an invitation letter from the head of your agency. That can happen a little bit later if you are based on your selection, but the way the Governor's Institute is formulated, that's what unlocks the funds. So, Jerry, what have I left out?
You have not left out a thing. We're going to let some folks ask questions. We will take them via the chat box. So on your screen, you should have a chat box that you can see, and just chat any questions you have to me into there. I'll see them, and I'll ask them, or answer them myself, or pose them to Beth. answer them. So
I will mention while folks are thinking of questions that while this program funds a one-day workshop, in some cases we are working with areas where they are matching the funding we have available to extend it to a day and a half or 2 days. We are happy to work with folks to address that, but having this funding available to at least do 1 day for free or at no charge to the state government can make it a little bit easier in some cases to unlock other funding to extend if that is necessary. But if a day is what you have, a day is what we can do, and we have plenty of ideas on how to make that as productive as possible.
Yep, definitely. The second day is sometimes helpful if, your agency wants to walk through a process or do some kind of, walk audit or tour or something like that. But a one-day workshop, we can definitely get a lot done.
And that's one of the things we're doing with one state right now is we'll do some discussion of best practices and what the state is trying to accomplish, and then we're going to do a walk audit of a particular corridor that's been a challenge. It has a lot of different pressures coming from different directions, including congestion issues, freight needs, and non-motorized needs, and development pressures along it as well. And then apply what we've learned to a specific corridor. A lot of times the generalized problems are easier to talk about in theory, but then when you start thinking about particular community and the politics come to play, it's always a little more complex than it would seem.
Thanks, Beth. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and chat them to us. They can be specific to how to apply, what the application questions are, more general, just about practical solutions in general, about the Governor's Institute. We are here to answer. And we'll give everybody a few minutes to think about that. I'm hoping that this means that our information was very thorough, but please don't hesitate to ask any questions you might have about the program. I'm going to put just that information page back up. Like Beth said, our deadline for applications is August 1st, and it's only 5 questions you need to answer. And then if you are selected at a later date, we'll require that invitation letter.
If folks need to talk with other staff, and in those conversations, other questions pop up, all you need to do is email Jerry, and we will be happy to answer them. Like I said, we have several ideas about how these can be put together, so if you're looking at ideas, we can certainly generate them, but we really try to be very flexible and fine-tune this to your state's needs. I just am not comfortable with having a template.
Sure. So I have 2 questions. The first one is, when will the workshops occur? So that is actually pretty flexible. We are able to start scheduling them as soon as the fall and winter, but we also can schedule them as far out as spring of next year.
I would say it takes us generally, we like to have 60 days to plan them. So once selections are made, we would start having conversations about agenda and dates and facilities and those sorts of things, and they will dictate a lot of this. Because we generally require about 60 days, I wouldn't see anything happening before October probably.
Yeah.
But then it's about making sure that we have the right invite list for your staff. We work around, are you all doing any sort of other training? Are there other things that are happening in the state that can interfere with particular dates? And we'll work to make sure it works for you all and for our staff experts as well.
Yep. And then a question about land use. So regarding the land use and transportation topic, would you have any general thoughts for states in which land use is almost entirely a local issue. The state does not have any land use authority.
Oh, I think this is such a great question because that's really the case in every state. There's very few states that have any land use authority at all. And what I generally hear from local engineers is, you walk into negotiations with a local, you design a road based on all the available information, and then they do something development-wise that completely undercuts everything that was negotiated for the design of that roadway. I was just dealing with folks, I've heard this in so many states, in Maryland and Hawaii and Utah, where particularly when you're dealing with an important arterial and maybe a school is put on the other side of an arterial from the neighborhood that it serves or far away from the neighborhood it serves, and then people show up saying the roadway is not designed well for kids to cross it, and I need the DOT to come up with money for busing, and all kinds of things happen when these things aren't properly considered. And what the locals will say, I will tell you because I deal with the land use planners too, is we do this very carefully thoughtful land use planning exercise, and if the engineers would just listen to us, everything would be fine. And then I go talk to the transportation engineers, and they say we do this really thoughtful, forward-thinking transportation planning process, and if the land use planners would just listen to what we've done, everything would be fine. And what we've done is spent about 75 years sitting in our corners and crossing our arms and saying, back to back, saying it's their fault. And it turns out that just doesn't work very well. So a lot of what we do is we help the state and the locals, and we've done this together with locals and states together in several places, talk about where each other's considerations are buried in their policies. We've worked with cities that consider traffic implications on their development and how they do that and what it means. We've worked with states to help them figure out how properly to consider land use and how not to design a roadway that undercuts a land use idea. What I think a lot of states engineers don't realize is, if you build a 6-lane with a turn lane, high-speed roadway, if that local community had been looking to have cafe seating on the side, there's not going to be cafe seating where there's 45-mile-per-hour traffic whizzing by them. So there are land use impacts to transportation design, and because we've kept them so separate from one another, we're undercutting each other at every turn. And so we've worked with a handful of states on how to consider land use properly, how to negotiate with land use authorities, and make sure that everyone understands what we're trying to accomplish and they're moving forward in the same direction.
Thanks, Beth. Any other questions from folks? And like Beth said, if you want to take this information back to your colleagues and the folks you work with, and then you come up with some questions for us, we're happy to set up a call or just handle things over email, whatever you prefer, to work through if this might be a good fit. And if you have questions about the application, once you are able to take a look, please don't hesitate to email me. My email's on the screen, jerry@govinstitute.org. We are available to chat. So I'm going to give it just another moment for folks to ask any last questions they might have. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining to learn a little bit more about the Accelerating Practical Solutions program. Again, applications are due on August 1st, and we look forward to working with many of you in the future. Don't hesitate to get in touch and have a great rest of your day. Thanks very much.